In the previous lesson, we saw the pivot clause, which transposes rows to columns and reports results from some aggregate function. We use a subquery in that statement to finesse the data and to define the columns we wanted to use in our pivot operator. In this lesson, the task is to rewrite the pivot query without using a subquery. From Oracle 9.2, Oracle introduced a new subquery refactoring clause called the with clause. In SQL Server, this is commonly referred to as common table expressions. The with clause creates a temporary table which can then be referenced and queried as any other table within your database. The whole purpose of using this with clause is to simplify the complexity of your queries, and sometimes it works best when you are trying to work with a lot of aggregate functions within queries. So you can actually query the result of an aggregate function within the same SQL statement. Let's turn over to SQL Developer and I'll demonstrate exactly what the with clause would do within your pivot operator. Over here in SQL Developer, I've written a small with clause which is as simple as it gets. A with clause begins with the word with, and then followed by the name of the temporary object that we want to create. So the results of this query, which is select department ID, employee ID, extract year from hire date, would actually become a temporary table called temp. You could name this whatever you want as long as you follow the normal naming conventions within Oracle. If I run this statement, for instance, it gives you the results of this query. Select department ID, employee ID, extract year from hire date as hire year. But because I've put this within a with clause, it forms a temporary object called temp, which means I can directly select anything from this temp table as long as it's one of the columns specified within that temporary object. So if I just say select star from temp and run it, you see it's going to return exactly the same results as we have within the query. So it comes in handy in the sense that if you want to do a group by, for instance, you won't have to pass this extract year from hire date anymore to whatever clause is coming after this with block. You can directly just reference hire year, which is the new column within the with temporary object. So you can begin to see how this solves our problem in the pivot function. In the pivot function, we actually placed all of this with clause part of our query within a subquery, and then we're selecting star from this subquery. But in this case, we've put this into a with clause, which simply means that we can select star from temp and not from a subquery. If I run this statement, it will give us exactly the same results as we had in our pivot function. Theory says that the with clause makes your query run faster than if you had inline views or inline subqueries. So the with clause comes in really handy in the sense that it eliminates some of the need to have subqueries in your queries, and it also works great when you want to pass in an aggregate function here, and then you can query the results of that aggregate function outside of the with block. Note that together with the main pivot clause, the temporary table defined within the with clause forms one complete statement. So if I run this section without the with section of this clause, it would give me an error. That's because there's no object called temp. All of this together, including the with clause, becomes one SQL statement.